to be kind of the domain of software developers. And that was to develop code in small modules so they could be developed very quickly and people didn't get lost in a bunch of stuff. And it was also managed in a different way. It was managed in what were called scrums, many of them, which are maybe a team is going to commit to what they're going to get done in the next 3 weeks. And that's what they do. They come in, they manage themselves, they keep everything public so everybody knows what's going on, and they work that way. And it's very productive. Well, you can read that if you're able to see it up there. But anyway, that now has gotten out of the realm of just being something for the IT people. It has gotten into mainstream engineering, mainstream everything else, because it works. And it's kind of the replacement for the waterfall development method that was very rigid, and you do this, and then you do that, you do this, then you do that. Then you take it out and try to sell it. Well, by then you have spent tons of money, and that's when you find out nobody wants it. So this whole process gets you in front of the client at the start. You can't be talking to a potential client too soon, because anything you pick up is going to be valuable. So the Harvard Business Review had an article called Embracing Agile, and John Deere was one of their examples. And so they had a working prototype of a new form, machine form, developed in 8 months, which was unheard of speed. The old way they used to do it had so many points where they had to get an agreement, they had to get permission. This didn't. It cleared all that away and said, let's do something. If we need to fix it, we'll fix it. So, and then the other thing that happened, if you look at that third point, was that the team engagement and happiness went from the bottom third of the company scores to the top third of the company. I mean, people really liked being managed this way because they were being self-managed. It was just in the open. Everybody could come in and see what they were doing. But then also the velocity, meaning the amount of work accomplished in each sprint, they called it, increased on average by more than double. Well, you say that to any profit-making organization and you got their attention. If you can improve something by 200%, they're going to listen to you. And some were as much as 4, some went up to 800. So no wonder companies are moving in that direction. I mean, this is a society that, is supposed to make money, and when you can make that much more money, it gives you something to talk about and do it so much faster. So then the origins of the lean launchpad were a fellow by the name of Steve Blank, who was a serial entrepreneur. He then became an investor because he did very well. And he then became an educator. And so for the past 20 years, he's been teaching at Stanford, 2 or 3 other places, but all names you would know. And then so he brought in the customer discovery and the customer development arms of this. A fellow, the lean startup was contributed by Eric Ries in a very famous book. It's a little book, it's a very quick read, but it is just bang, bang, bang. Here's how you should develop things. It's a very tight loop that you keep coming back to the user, making improvements, coming back to the user. And then finally the business model canvas, which we looked at. And all that together was kind of the lean launch pad. And Blank began teaching that in 2011. Our instructors all went out to Stanford and sat in on about a half-week-long class of his, and that was in 2013. So we got a nice early start in this, and it's been very, very useful. Out of that grew a lot of interest from the US government because they were beginning to see the efficiencies and the cost savings, what have you. And they developed a prototype called ICORPS, ICORPS, for the National Science Foundation to improve the value of grant research. And by 2015, the NSF made it a requirement that you go through this training if you were going to apply for an NSF grant. And what they discovered, they did some blind studies of people who had submitted applications who had been through this program and people who had not. And they found that the group that had not had a failure rate of somewhere around 61% failed to be approved. The group that had been through this training had something like a failure rate of 20%. So I mean, it was just a tremendous change. And that's why they made it mandatory. And so that whole thing is being taught at over 50 universities around the US. Ironically, Purdue isn't one. And the reason for that is that, as our head of our department said, we can't make any money doing it. They basically want us to give it away, and we don't have the resources. So much for that. And that's now reached the Department of Defense. It's just gone everywhere. And the one thing I would tell you is that the focus of our program is not entrepreneurship, which is doing something in a large company. It's startup businesses. That's where we decided we wanted to make the mark there. So, any questions about any of this? Okay, customer discovery and customer development. This is where Steve Blank really came into his own, and there are a couple of fairly quick, well, excuse me. I think I'm in trouble. Here we are. Maybe I'm doing this wrong. Here we go.
For 21 years, I did 8 startups in a variety of industries. 2 semiconductor companies, enterprise software, video games, consumer electronics, military intelligence, and it was the most exciting thing I could imagine spending my life doing. But now for the last 14 years, I've been an educator. I've been teaching entrepreneurs how to think a different way about startups and how to build their companies in a very efficient way. Hi, I'm Steve Blank. I'm a retired serial entrepreneur. In this series, we're going to talk about 2 big ideas. How are startups different from large companies? And the second thing is something called the lean startup. And inside the lean startup, we're going to talk about the customer development process. We're going to talk about how to build a minimum viable product, how to build prototypes, and then we're going to talk about customer acquisition. We're going to actually get out of the building, talk to customers, and then get them to use or buy your product.
Okay, and the lean method maybe.
Turns out that a lean startup consists of three components. One is business model design, two is customer development, and three is agile engineering. And these three components help startups become incredibly efficient, reducing the amount of time to get the first product and reducing the amount of cash necessary to build that product. So in a lean startup, we really know something quite different than a large company. In a lean startup, we know that you just don't execute per plan. You're actually going to be learning and discovering from customers outside your office. You kind of know that there are no facts inside your building, so you're going to get the heck outside. We also know that you're not smarter than the collective intelligence of your potential customers. So what we're going to do is put together a process that allows you to rapidly learn by getting out of the building and testing some of your key ideas and key features of the product as quickly and as rapidly as we can. And what you're going to find is a good number of your initial hypotheses are just simply wrong. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to start with writing down all the hypotheses. And a common framework we use is Alexander Osterwalder's business model canvas. This 9-box diagram puts all the hypotheses about your business. Who are the customers? What are you building for them? What's the channel? How are you going to reach them? How are you going to make money? And puts them in a single page. So it's going to provide a framework and then a scorecard for us to see how we're doing. But unlike just doing strategy in a large company, you're going to take these hypotheses and go outside the building and actually test them. Not test them randomly, but test them with a formal process called customer development. What we're going to do is design experiments, run the experiments outside the building, get the data, and look for insights. And in fact, the way we're going to actually get insights is by showing customers either PowerPoint, wireframes, clay models, prototypes, at any stage we can to actually gather as much information as we can about their feedback. And one of the things we're going to find out is that there are two unique things we do in a lean startup. One is when our hypotheses turn out to be incorrect, instead of firing people, we actually get to change those hypotheses. And these are called pivots. A pivot is defined as a substantive change to one or more of the business model canvas components. If it's a minor change, we call it an iteration. And so in a normal company or a fashion startup, we fire the VP of sales if their assumptions were wrong. Here what we're doing is firing the plan. Not only does this work for startups, it actually works for large companies as well. We work for General Electric, one of the smartest big companies in the world. And GE was about to commercialize some of their high-temperature sulfur battery technology. And they wanted to offer these batteries to other companies for industrial applications. And they had done a great market research report and had pages of here's where the product should go. And the CEO was going to give the general manager, Prescott Logan, $100 million to just go build the factory and go execute. Hire the staff and whatever. We have the technology and here's the report. But Prescott, luckily, said, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel like an existing business. This feels like a startup. And we got to check our hypotheses. And so Prescott Logan and his customer development team flew around to almost every continent, in fact, every continent in the world, including Antarctica, and discovered that the requirements actually differed by industry segments. Substantially enough is that if they would have had a standard factory making standard product, they would have sold none of them. Because different customers require different packaging, different cooling, different connectors, and none of this was visible from inside the building. After 18 months, they figured out who the customers were, what they wanted, and then built the factory. And now, a couple of years later, they have backlogs for the next 3 years. And so what we now know is that no business plan survives first contact with customers. That means we wouldn't know whether we were right or wrong until after we shipped the product and customers gave us feedback. And by then, we've burned lots of time, lots of money, and potentially are out of business. But imagine if you had a process that allowed you to quickly iterate and incrementally build the product a piece at a time. For each increment, learning and discovering whether you were on the right track. What's the right track? Do you have the right customers for the right features, which we call product market fit? Do you have the right distribution channel? Do you have the right revenue model, right pricing, partners? Do you understand your costs? We have a process now to test each one of these incrementally, cheaply, and quickly. And that's what the whole lean startup model is about.
Well, you've all heard of Moore's Law, and that's, what's still driving this. And in a book called Bold, which I think is a fabulous book, it's very, very oriented on what's going on today in terms of the X-fold improvement in processing speeds versus costs. You multiply those together, both are good things. Higher processing speeds, lower cost. So the percent of each of those multiplied by each other, can you figure out what the value of that is over the 40-year period between 1972 and 2012? Just as a guess.
Let's go for
1,000, okay? 10,000. Boy, he's a daredevil. Anybody else want to get in on this? 50,000. Oh my God, I may have to sit down. Well, I'll tell you, my class was the very same way. The largest answer I could finally beat out of them was 10 billion. And that was too small. The answer is 100 billion. And that's explaining why we can do things now, today, in terms of big data, processing huge amounts of stuff, why we can do that now because of that speed. So it's something to ponder. This is a whole new world here. Okay, I think we're at the point where we have to consider letting you people escape here. Any questions before we shut off? Okay, well, I appreciate your attention, and it's been fun talking to you. So good luck to all of you.